1994, 13 years of imprisonment was given to the head of the Sumskoy Territorial Directorate of the Military Service of Ukraine, Vladimir Tokarev. I would like to take advantage of my position. I would like to highlight and congratulate our colleagues from the Investigative Committee with the anniversary. 15 years ago, on the 15th of January 2018, the President of the Russian Federation established the Investigative Committee. You are our colleagues. On a daily basis, you confront the most complicated challenges. With your dedication and professionalism, you make procedural control, and I would like to address these congratulations to my colleagues from the Investigative Commission, because this work is valuable, is truly valuable. They do a lot. I mean, the officers of the Investigative Committee, in order to ensure lawfulness and keeping historic memory. This contribution is very valuable, and we appreciate it a lot. Thank you very much for your work, for your dedication in our common cause. And please accept my congratulations with your holiday, with your anniversary. Right now, these efforts are very relevant. On the one side, they are legal efforts, and on the other side, they are based on the understanding of the importance to preserve the historic memory. For example, in Lvov, the torchlight procession of the collaborationist of Bandera was held, and the participants, the young neo-Nazi, I think they are not now aged for mobilization, but they are already flooded with the misanthropic ideology. Basically, the current supporters of Bandera are terrorists, because back then, in the 1930s, for the complicity to the killing of some citizens of Poland, including of its Home Minister Bronislaw Piransky, was sentenced to the life imprisonment, and he managed to escape from prison thanks to the beginning of the Second World War. These are the facts. And for this organization of modern Banderovites, these killings of civilians is a daily routine for them. In all its rallies, they prefer to hide their faces under masks because they are fearing to face responsibility, to face justice, or trying to escape forced mobilization raging out in Ukraine. They are masking among their fellow guys. And that's how they reveal their nature. In defending this blasphemous ideology, while doing it secretly. Moreover, they are aware that being captured, they can betray everyone and tell and exaggerate. So that's why they mask themselves. Likewise, they are ideological icons who, after the death sentence, were stripped of the nationalist swagger and arrogance. And they were telling the truth as it was. So our next section is dedicated to all those who fund them. On the 9th of January, Kiev was given a brief visit of the Defense Minister of the UK, John Healey, to discuss the aspects of military and political aid by London of the Zelenskyy regime. In January, Ukraine will get English plants to produce drones interceptors, Octopus. John Healey reported on the development in the UK of a ballistic missile Nightfall in order to increase the fire capabilities of the Ukrainian army. And this is a step towards war. Around £18 million is allocated in order to establish a sample. London also reserved in its defense budget allowed about £200 million to train multinational forces in Ukraine. And you, of course, remember that the coalition of the willing agreed on sending such forces. A roadmap was signed that defines practical steps within the framework of the century-old defense partnership, announcing the next meeting of the contact group on the defense assistance to Ukraine in the Ramstein format in order to increase the defense capabilities of Ukraine. And we'll expand on that a bit later, because the West does not want to stop and to put an end to the conflict. There are facts of 24 hours operation of the airport in the Polish Rzeszowie, which is now a hub for cargo for the military purposes of Ukraine. The British and Canadian Army plays an important role here, as well as private transport air companies, which have connections with the military agency of the United States. There are also medical flights from Germany and Spain mainly. These actions of the European NATO organization to pump Kyiv with funds and guns are quite telling. They do not seek peace.
Now is the so-called child's topic for the Kiev regime. Do you try to understand who make the Ukrainian children suffer? First of all, from Zelenskyy and his wife. In December 2025, there was a huge scandal to do with Ukrainian children being taken out to Turkey. In the spring of 2022, within the project of Yelena Zelenskyy and businessman Ruslan Shostak, and it was called very beautifully Childhood Without War. A group of underage orphans were ostensibly taken from Dnipropetrovsk to Turkey for supposedly humanitarian purposes. As it turned out later, they were deprived of adequate care. They could not study. They were regularly involved in making propaganda videos. They were left without food, punished with force, humiliated, and prohibited to talk to Turkish psychologists. But the truth was out. For example, 2 girls got pregnant and they were taken back to Ukraine to avoid a scandal. To hide this fact or ascribe them to the Kremlin propaganda is something that the Kiev regime could not do. It was too huge of a case. But they still tried to keep silence about that. On January the 9th, the ombudsman of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, Dmitry Lubinets, had to give an official commentary about this that revealed a lot of outrageous facts. It turned out that the Turkish side notified the Ukrainian MFA about undue treatment of children. However, those signals were not taken into account. Even more, the representatives of the Ministry of Social Policy of Ukraine in 2023, on the basis of the analysis, assessed the conditions positively. Can you imagine that? The Turkey told to the Kiev regime that there's something going on with your children on the Turkish territory, but the answer was everything was okay. In early 2024, the Ukrainian ombudsman, children themselves and other sources shared information, including by the Turkish side, about the violation of the rights of underage in the camp. a monitoring group was sent there. It registered undue treatment of children. This report ended up in the media that published it. In this regard, it is telling that a number of international structures, NGOs, are keeping silence about it. There are a lot of such bodies, and the International Coalition for taking Ukrainian children back is keeping silence as well. Why don't they investigate that? They together and accuse Russia of kidnapping and deportation of Ukrainian children, but they keep silence and shame when such outrageous facts are revealed. The facts of abuse against the underage with the acquiescence of the Kiev regime and Yelena Zelenskyy personally. But probably those bodies have a different agenda. Probably they deal they care not about all Ukrainian children, but these children that were abused, they were indeed taken out of Ukraine, but not by Russia, but by the Kiev regime. This proves yet again a thing that we mentioned many times. The Kiev regime and its Western sponsors couldn't care less about Ukrainian children and their rights. Their main aim is to blacken Russia and not to let the image of Zelenskyy to be stained. Here we have one more topic. This about the language. In Ukraine, the defenders of the state Ukrainian language sound the alarm. But what happened, do you think? Something we mentioned already. Despite the continued linguistic terror against the Russian-speaking people, Ukraine sees the decrease of the use of the Ukrainian in favor of Russian. It's just a fact. The way to change the trend was prompted by the grandchild of Stepan Bandera, who lives in Canada. His name is Stepan Bandera Jr. He said that when he supplied the hockey equipment to Ukrainian children, during conversation with their parents, he learned that after Bucha, the coaches attempted to speak Ukrainian, but then abandoned this practice. But what did Stepan Bandera in Canada said? He said, another Bucha is needed so that people speak Ukrainian. Do you think it is okay? Wonderful conclusion. No comments are needed. This is something that should be discussed in the Council of Europe, OSCE, and other institutions. This is the reason for the meetings of various coalitions. That's what should be considered. Not because no alternative point of view is possible under democracy, but because this is the ideology of the Kiev regime. But it was spoken by the ancestor of the person that is a hero in Ukraine. The ombudsman for protection of the state language, Elena Ivanovska, said that those people in Ukraine who consider themselves Homo sapiens made a choice in favor of Ukrainian. How can I explain that? This rant, it cannot be called a thought or an idea. This is a horrible thing to say. Can you imagine that? Homo sapiens chose the Ukrainian language, and those who chose any other language, the Hungarian, for example, Greek, any other language, do they stop being people being Homo sapiens. Under this logic, and here is the tragedy. That is exactly what is going on. Those who does not choose what they are imposed on, they stop being people. This is the essence of the Nazism, of what Bandera did while collaborating with the Third Reich. Everything that is not implemented in terms of this forced ideology should be taken out. And then they will see what they're going to do with this inferior people, to destroy or to be used for experiments, I don't know. This is a terrible thing. I also wonder what type is her daughter, Ivanovskaya. What type or class is her daughter? Because her daughter of Yelena Ivanovskaya has her accounts in social networks in Russian and makes video to Russian language songs. Probably her daughter works in a zoo or in a circus. On January 8th, a group of MPs, headed by the fighters with the Russian language Vladimir Vetrovich and Natalia Pipa, introduced a bill to the Verkhovna Rada providing for the ban of the Russian language in private educational facilities. I would like to remind them that under the current legislation of Ukraine, private schools have a right to choose the language of instruction on their own. This was a recommendation of the Venice Commission of the Council of Europe. And I mean, it is very telling that the results of the survey conducted in December 2025 show that almost 50% of the people in Ukraine speak, as you probably know, Russian at home. Given the biased character of this research and the level of fear among the population, the real number of people who speak Russian is much higher. This begs a question. In the democratic society, as you remember, when it all started in early 2000s, 2010s, in the democratic society, is it okay to persecute people for the language they speak at home, or the language they speak to their children, or the language they think? Here is one more terrible thing that is being shaped. On December 31st, before the new year, the head of the Ukrainian Institute of National Memory, Alexander Alfarov, announced that this revisionist structure is going to increase its status. In his statement, he announced the beginning of the offense against its heritage, the Reconquista. This, according to him, the Institute does something that is dangerous for the enemy and brings the victory closer. The basis for this statement was the steps of the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine to implement the decommunization law adopted on August 21st, 2025. The decree of the government of December 12, 2025, the budget of the Institute of National Memory for 2026, in comparison to the previous years, has been tenfold and reached $500,000. The team was extended to 22 people. The authority was extended. Now they not only implement the state policy in restoration and preservation of national memory, but also its shaping. The head of this institution may start to make up blacklists to cleanse the public space from Russian and Soviet memorial heritage. But another thing is clear as well. The closer the collapse of the Kiev regime, the more active Ukrainian Nazis are. This will harm people in Ukraine. This cannot erase the historical truth, though it can maim Ukrainian people. These facts and everything that we're going to talk about today, most of it reconfirm the relevance of the goals to denazify and demilitarize Ukraine and to remove threats coming from its territory. All these goals will be achieved. Something about London. In the recent months, we have noted the growing aggressive and belligerent attacks against Russia. We are systematically represented as a direct and clear threat for the security of Great Britain and its allies. And London is constantly making up initiatives against us, Russophobic initiatives. It's been only 2 weeks into the new year. The new year has only just begun, and the British establishment has distinguished itself in an ambiguous way. For example, on January the 6th in Paris, on the sidelines of the get-together of the coalition of the willing, as they call themselves, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, Keir Starmer, together with the President of France, Emmanuel Macron, and the head of the Kiev regime, Vladimir Zelenskyy, signed a declaration on intentions providing for the deployment in Ukraine of multinational forces and essentially the Western occupational forces. We understanding that this scenario is not acceptable for Russia, the British use this as yet another instrument to undermine peace process with the US participation. We warn that the attempt to implement this idea, the responsibility for the lives of subjects of the United Kingdom, will belong fully to London. Our position remains unchanged, is well known. On January the 7th, the Defence Minister of Great Britain, John Healey, during his statement to the Parliament of the country, publicly recognized that Great Britain was involved in the illegal seizure of the Russian tanker by the US. He said that the London, on the request of Washington, largely facilitated this operation. He also said, despite the clear fact that the Marinera ship was sailing under the false flag, London started examining the issue of using a national law on sanctions and money laundering of 2018 as a legal framework to involve the British armed forces to detain in the high seas ships that, according to London, circumvent the unilateral illegal restrictions. This process focuses, of course, to harm the Russian interests. The implementation of such aggressive intentions will be seen by us as direct violation of the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea of 1982. On January 9th, in Kiev, the above-mentioned John Healey, citing the kidnapping of the president of Venezuela by the US, said that he would like to arrest and convict the president of Russia for, as he said, crimes. I already commented on that, but I'll reiterate. We believe that these statements of the British Defense Minister are his personal and not quite adequate fantasies that unfortunately makes us think about the fallacy, about the material that many modern Western politicians are made of. Leaving alone the threadbare accusations, as they say, and the propaganda cliches, it is clear for any sensible person that such attempts against the head of nuclear power will have catastrophic consequences for the initiators. On January 11th, the very same John Healey announced the development of nightfall ballistic missiles with a range of 500 kilometers and resistance to radioelectronic warfare. We'd like to note that the possible use by the Kiev regime of such similar missiles will bring closer the moment when London will be declared a direct party to the conflict with all the consequences ensued. We suspect that this British gush of anti-Russian initiatives is yet to be depleted. The London establishment cannot but understand that this is not helpful in the long term, but the problem is that they exploit this myth about the Russian threat. They try and use it for the lightning conductor inside the country. It's much easier to ascribe all these troubles to Russia.
Internationally, the UK tries to lure away the Western camp from the internal disputes on Greenland and to rally Europe for the long-term fight against Russia. And they bet on the Ukrainian project in such destructive efforts, and it's quite clear, crystal clear. The British politicologists cannot tolerate the success of our country during the special military operation and are committed to protract the conflict, hoping to outlast Russia. Such a policy of the UK leadership is not only short-blinded, but cements among the overwhelming majority as the image of instability and instigator of conflicts, recalling the high-profile pictures from the colonial past of the United Kingdom. And we call the British authorities to exercise restraint and to come back to the respectful and equal international dialogue. And London, back then, in cooperation with our country, made a significant contribution in its fight against fascism, and as a permanent member of the National Security Council. As for Moldova, authorities are witch-hunting with the so-called threat of Russia. Papshoy defended that those who live in Moldova, these people can be involved in the war and sent to the front line when processing certain documents. And they were allegedly being suck cases to sign military contracts. No evidence was submitted, and predictably it ended up in unbiased accusations. Towing the official line of this policy, the academicians of Moldova, unfortunately, make anti-Russia statements. And for the people below who belong to science, you cannot act like that. They should be based on facts and on science, rather than following this policy oriented by Chisinau. On the 2nd of January, a professor of the Moldovan State University, the head of the Association of Historians, Anatoly Petrenko, not only even went beyond justification of the strikes on Russia and actually branded the leadership of our country as a legitimate military target to defend Ukraine, end of quote. Such statements is another confirmation what we were talking about on a regular basis, on the consolidation of the Moldovan authorities with the Kiev regime, that it affected even academicians. And the official Chisinau pay lip service concerning about the destiny of its people. In fact, it implements a policy that is deliberately against its people. Let me cite another examples. Censorship coupled with a crackdown on public discourse in Moldova is continued. On January the 12th, one of the major cable TV providers said it would stop broadcasting 14 Russian TV channels, remove the Russian language audio tracks on another TV channels, replacing them with 31 mainly Romanian broadcasters. In the Republic, in Moldova, the public commented the situation as the information bubble. Let me recall that in 2022, Moldova revoked broadcasting licenses from 18 Russian channels. Moreover, according to open source data, Moldova stopped broadcasting of Golden Collection and Homeland Channel TV channels because they broadcasted, as they said, as they put it, with the broadcasting the films about war. So to put it in other words, the films about the war, about the crimes of the 20th century, where the Moldovans were heroes, you cannot watch them right now. Basically, any film about the war telling the glorious past of Moldova right now are banned, and no wonder that the Minister of Culture of the Moldova, Christian Jordan, was one of the reasons for closing the Russian Center of Science and Culture in Chisinau, called an advancement of legacy as a distortion of history, and I quote. Of course, the Moldovan authorities have other heroes. What is striking that the history textbook published last year, the history of Romanians and general history for the 12th grade, justifies the participation of the fascist Romania, headed by Antonescu, on Hitler's side, while the crimes of the Nazi regime against civilians hushed up and the soldiers of the Red Army are represented as aggressors and invaders. It is obvious that official Chisinau makes everything to provoke in Moldova social tensions, which can trigger mass emigration of the Moldovans abroad. The main reports suggest that every fourth Moldovan lives abroad, and that's are the consequences of complete disregard of the authorities of the country to the destiny of its own people. We received a lot of questions from media outlets, both from Russian and foreign, on the situation in Iran. And let me bring your attention that the relevant comment was published on the 13th of January on our website, and it's relevant. Yesterday, there was a response of Lavrov during the joint press conference with the Minister of Foreign Minister and the Minister of Trade of Namibia. You can see it on the website. So in general, all the comments as of today, and if we see them later, there are a lot of questions, and I would put it, there were some, for example, Lentaru, Nizru, and Anadolu, and TASS, and Reuters, and Media Corporation China, asking to speak about the Greenland. We compiled all the questions and prepared a kind of a comprehensive response. The Minister of Foreign Affairs traditionally does not make any comments and is not engaged in public talks about relations with other states, but along with that, our country is a major Arctic power and keeps a close eye on the situation in Greenland. We believe that any disputes in this autonomous self-governing territory must be settled at the negotiation table under the international law with due account of the locals of Greenland. We should mention that the current tensions in this Danish autonomous territory highlights the failure of the Western world order, rules-based West order. This flawed nature of this historic policy led by Copenhagen, trying to on obedience to its elder ally, is plain to see. Right now, after the recent publication of the Strategy of National Security of the United States, reads that the part of the territory of the kingdom has been fallen within the U.S. sphere of interests. And of course, it's quite dubious amid this background the efforts and the myth about the so-called Russian threat zealously advanced by Denmark and other members of the European Union, NATO. And right now, it's ended up that it's just the sphere of national interests of the United States. We support China, denying any references to the alleged involvement of Russia and China in Greenland as a pretext for the current escalation before accusing any others in any disputes. NATO and EU should above all recognize their own responsibility for the deep and rapid erosion of the legal framework of the global security architecture. One of the first signals of this progressive revisionism was recognition, unilateral declaration of independence of Kosovo and Metohija. And we can recall how it played out in 2008 when a number of Western states headed by the United States flagrantly violated the fundamental principles of international law and the UN Charter above all. Right then and there, the Western states undermined the fundamental principles of territorial integrity, territorial and inviolability of borders, which is now being recalled in the context of Greenland. I believe that they thought they believed that they can do whatever they want and get away unpunished. So that's why we insist that we should know the history, and they won't go unpunished. Right now, there is direct outcome of these activities, and we are persuaded that the growth of tensions in the Arctic region is a direct outcome of the actions of NATO as a bloc and in the capacity of some member states, the actions to plant into Arctica of confrontation, neocolonial approaches, their efforts to militarize the high latitudes and turn them into geopolitical confrontation arena. And this is a matter of serious concern to us. For Russia, as a large major Arctic power, has always been the region of strategic importance. Our country remains committed to supporting peace and stability in the high latitude, open for the mutually beneficial and respectful dialogue with constructively minded foreign partners, including those from beyond the region. Despite the tricky situation with international cooperation, Russia continues its full-fledged participation in this key structure in the north, the Arctic Council, in the frame which is the venue for the contacts, high-level contacts with other Arctic states. It is important to understand that any attempts to ignore Russia's interests in the Arctic region will not go unanswered, and Russia will remain steadfast in establishing its positions and ensuring sustainable social and economic development, preserving environment, cultural heritage, and traditional lifestyle of indigenous people. And we'll continue our policy to strengthen national sovereignty in the Arctic region, first and foremost of our defense capabilities and infrastructure of the northern sea route. And by the way, another topic which is directly concerned with the Arctic region and Greenland. We paid attention on the recent publications on the debates and the plans of NATO on launching the new mission, the so-called Arctic Guard. So they are trying to show that they are trying to pioneer the interests of the collective West and to show the Americans they can defend Greenland from Russia, China, with their own forces. So they made up a kind of a aggressor, and they invented a kind of a victim. So in doing so, the Western states say that there is no longer need to implement the administration of Trump plans to establish control on this island. It's a sophisticated and tricky situation, and we view it as another provocation of the West seeking to plant its orders, make it here in this part of the world. Let me recall you that before the Arctic zone was conflict-free. Right now, it's being transformed into a place of geopolitical confrontation. In order to consolidate their positions, the West, as predictable, willing to employ force. The presence of NATO is clearly destabilizes the military and political situation in the region. On this path of militarization of the Arctic, the European capitals must mind that their efforts to escalate situation in the high latitudes and to put in jeopardy the full-fledged member of the Arctic community, and I refer to Russia, of course, will incur the most serious consequences. And the news from the same region: on the 10th of January, Helsinki decided to denounce the use and stockpiling of and transfer of land stockpiling and anti-personnel mines, which was Finland was the part of the international agreement since 2012. The Finland justified their withdrawal with reference to the demands of the national security amid deteriorated situation caused by, and guess, caused by aggression of Russia against Ukraine. We view this decision of the Finnish authorities, adopted under falsified pretext, as another demonstration of a destructive line to militarize the country and actively build up the military potential in order to counteract this Russian threat. And this fits within the overall strategy of the West to pioneer control, arms control, and undermine the arms control regime, disarmament, and non-proliferation. And this is a selfish and irresponsible behavior of West in terms of international legal obligations. And we've reiterated this this detrimental approach when we made a comment such efforts on withdrawal from this convention, including withdrawal of Poland and Baltic states. We believe that the decision of Helsinki will lead and will escalate more tensions in Europe and deteriorate situation in the regional and international security. Russia preserves its right to respond to any hostile activities and, if needed, resorting to force, to the use of force. How the West manages to advance all these theses of the so-called Russian threat. And I wonder, how do they do so? As for the propaganda, so one example as it playing out, Germany. We are seeing that repressions in the mass media campaign is being increasing. The campaign launched by Germany to counter the popularity of the Russian mass media in Germany is gaining momentum and now is used to crack down any dissent among Germans, affecting their own German media outlets. The results are plain to see. The results, and Germany, which is at every turn tries to pose as a champion of freedom. The study held in late 2025 by the German Allensbach Institute, only 46 respondents still consider that in Germany you can openly discuss political issues. The polls of the polling agency DIMAP show that 60% of Germans are very cautious about their statements about fearing adverse effects. The Mentefactum's poll center said that only 43% of the German citizens allegedly can speak their mind. To stifle the disfavored, the German authorities resort to the so-called debunking. What does it mean? This is a concealed tool and toolbox when commercial banks force to stop serving individuals and legal entities blacklisted by the German government. And I remember quite well Annalena Baerbock when she came to Moscow, and all this amid repressive actions of Germany against RT Deutsch TV channel. And while answering to the question, she said that the government of Germany did not do anything in order to restrict the freedom of speech and never interferes in mass media, whether it was about satellites, and that they have nothing to do with that. In the alternative media of Germany said that since 2020 there were 40 of such cases, the so-called concealed debunking. The term debunking is becoming a revenge for the critical, in terms of official Berlin articles, petitions, and online campaign. Among the victims of financial oppressions are members of Opposition Party of Alternative of Germany, Communist Party of Germany, Socialist Party of Equality, Marxist and Lenin Party of Germany, and left-wing publisher Mering Verlag. This is a powerful trend, and we should admit that, and the Germans themselves speak loud about this. And I would like to recall the situation with RT Deutsch.
This was the first example, and it is the government of Germany that is behind that did everything possible so that the German language TV channel was not available for the people in Germany. I would like to seize this opportunity and to greet the Union of Journalists of Germany that says that it is not possible in Germany because it is a free country, but figures are a stubborn thing. They show otherwise. The accounts of inconvenient journalists are closed. For example, of Aya Velasquez. She's a well-known because she published documents of the Robert Koch German Institute during the coronavirus pandemic. Of Hussein Dogru, who was listed in the sanctioned list of the EU for the spread of pro-Palestinian narratives, of Flavio von Witzleben, who in 2024 interviewed the Russian ambassador to Germany. The Russian German language TV channel RTDE, not long before it was banned in Germany, was also was refused services in the German banks. The government did not only do that, but they also lied that they didn't do that. We believe that in the nearest future, the situation in the German information space is going to deteriorate. Amid this witch hunt, there is a combination of total Russophobia and internal repressions. We received a lot of questions about Somalia. We follow closely the developments in the Federative Republic of Somalia and in the run-up of the general elections scheduled for 2026. We believe that it is necessary to ensure non-interference of external players into internal political processes in Somalia to preserve its territorial integrity and unity. We believe that the settlement of the existing differences between the federal government and the leadership of a number of Somalian states should be made on the basis of mutually acceptable agreements. We call on the sides to continue searching for such solutions to shape a sustainable model of the federal structure of Somalia. We're seriously concerned by the continued activities of the terror group Al-Shabaab in Somalia. We believe that the presence of African Union Support and Stabilization Mission in Somalia is an important factor to counter illegal activities in the country. Russia will continue facilitating Mogadishu. Uruguay, within the events dedicated to the 80 years of the victory in the Great Patriotic War on December 29, 2025, Uruguayan Postal Service issued a memorial stamp marking this important event in the world history. Its circulation was 2,500 items. I would like to note that this event was prepared on the initiative of the Coordination Council of the Organizations of Russian Compatriots of Uruguay, with facilitation of the Embassy of Russia in Montevideo and Uruguayan authorities. We thank Uruguay for this gesture of friendship and solidarity with Russia. While some preserve the memory and perpetrate the memory, they pay tribute to their real heroes, others do exactly the opposite. On December 15, 2024, the local authorities of the Czech city of Teplice made an outrageous decision to fully take down the memorial dedicated to the Red Army soldiers. On May the 7th, 2025, in the run-up to the celebrations of the 80 years of the victory of Nazi Germany, the vandals destroyed the central element of the monument, the sculpture of a Soviet soldier. It has not been rebuilt yet. Within the implementation of the decision made on December 19, 2025, the monument was the Soviet symbols were taken down from the monument. The Embassy of Russia in the Czech Republic made reprehensions to the Czech MFA and underlined that the local authorities de facto expressed solidarity with the vandals. This is absolutely unacceptable and contradicts the the perpetration of historical memory. The soldiers from Czechoslovakia, shoulder to shoulder, fought with the soldiers, with fellow soldiers from the Red Army to liberate their country. The attempts to diminish the great deeds of the soldiers of the Red Army betray the memory about the joint fight of the peoples of Czechoslovakia and the Soviet Union against Nazism. On December 31st, 2025, Dhaka saw the state funeral of the former Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Khaleda Zia. She died the day before that at the age of 80. As the leader of the Nationalist Party of Bangladesh, she for decades played an important role in the life of her country and twice headed the national government. We especially value the personal contribution of Khaleda Zia in the development of Russia-Bangladesh political, trade, and economic and cultural ties. We express our sincere condolences for such a terrible loss. One more announcement. From January 23rd through February 8th, the Gostiny Dvor Exhibition Center will host the 6th Arts and Trade Fair Unique Russia. A major fair of traditional and modern arts will start the year of 2026 that was declared by the decree of the President of Russia, a year of unity of peoples of Russia. This fair presents the best achievements of the Russian traditional arts. The visitors will be able to get to know unique products of folk arts and crafts, the works of artists, decorative masters, potters, enamelists, leather workers, smiths, sculptors, clothing designers. The fair will have roll-ups of Russian regions. This fair is called Unique Russia. I'll tell you one more time. It will feature more than 20 exhibitions and art projects. It is expected that more than 4,000 participants from 77 regions of Russia will participate. About 1,500 artists and masters from 7 all-Russian district associations will participate as well. More than 100 entertainment events are planned. With every year, the international component of the fair is expanding every year. This year there will be a function of Russia-Arab friendship, January 28th International Russia-China Forum, and the function of friendship with Tajikistan, February the 3rd. We invite Russian and foreign media and journalists to visit the fair and to see for themselves the cultural diversity of our country. I also would like to say that I'm ready to take your question. It is the International Affairs with us. Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. It seems that there wasn't a break. There wasn't a day when we didn't answer your questions and calls. This is a tradition of ours. Please. I would like to ask about an important event that happened during the holidays. Donald Trump made a statement regarding Cuba. He said that he made a proposal to the Cuban authorities to make a deal until it is too late. I would like to hear your comments. We, of course, follow closely the situation in Latin America and in the Caribbean. We express our concern with the growing tensions and escalation of the aggressive narratives, including against the Republic of Cuba, that is friendly to us. We support the settlement of any interstate differences through political and diplomatic ways. We believe that the language of blackmail and threats are unacceptable, especially against Cuba, that has experienced a lot of illegal sanctions and methods that went down in history as a blockade. We believe that pragmatic approach and common sense will prevail ultimately. Thanks to you is RIA Novosti with us. Yes, Madam Zakharova, we are here. If I may, we have 2 questions today. The first one, in the Council of Europe called on to punish Russia after the strike with the Reshnik. How does Moscow see such statements, given the decision of our country to withdraw from the Council? But I am surprised by another thing. Why aren't you interested in other calls, for example, to punish the Council of Europe with the Reshnik? And we hear such calls more and more often. Why do you care? Only on the other side and such points of view. We should mention that there are a lot of commentaries, opposite commentaries. The Council of Europe supports the criminal Kiev regime. This is organization is controlled by unfriendly states, and it shows striking selectiveness and double standards. It is degrading and attracts attention with high-profile anti-Russian crazy statements. Given the decision made by our country in 2022 to withdraw from the Council of Europe, there is no need to comment on this. I'd like to underline one more time the attempts, as they say, to punish Russia. Or what else do they want to do with us? They are futile and to be laughed at. Such actions of our opponents from Strasbourg won't change anything. Well, I have another question, if I may. What can you say about the recent statement of the museum and memorial complex at Nafam about the memory of the victims of the genocide? They accused our country in distorting and manipulating facts, given that the Russian authorities did not refer to the terrible crimes of the Holocaust against the Ukrainian people. We could not ignore such statements of clearly provocational character. We also responded to them immediately through our embassy in Israel. Our mission sent an open letter to the head of board that debunks these accusations. The copy of this letter was published in the official accounts of the Russian embassy to Israel. There were also other events with explanations. We will provide all the links to this letter. I'd like to add one thing. We are surprised by such decisiveness by the memorial complex to accuse Russia in distortion of history amid the full-fledged war, many-year war, started against the monuments of the Red Army, started by the Russophobe countries in the Baltic states, Ukraine and other countries. They physically destroyed the memorials to the to the Soviet soldiers. And I would like to remind that the Red Army saved the Jews who survived in the Holocaust, but the victims included the victims of Holocaust. They were not they did not identify themselves and they did not have separate national identities. A lot of ancestors and relatives of the Red Army soldiers who were buried in these monuments now live in Israel and other Western countries. They speak a lot about the Holocaust. At the same time, they, for some reason, do not respond to the facts that the monuments to the Red Army soldiers are taken down. These monuments are materialized history of those events. Jan Vashur, for some reason, was not outraged when Malbork, with the participation of an official, destroyed a monument to the fallen Russian Soviet soldiers. But Soviet soldiers we have a lot of examples for Yad Vashem. We have hundreds of examples, and I can send him a list. We have a map of the monuments that were taken down. We work in this particular case as part of the Russian society, not only inside our country, but with our compatriots abroad. It's a global public movement. Go to the portal masterparameter.rf. There, together with Russian military and historic society, we track down all those memorials. We called on the MFA of Israel to be involved in our protest, in our work to preserve the monuments. But they never did that. We always shared that memory, including in Israel, I mean officials. now we feel the support of the people in Israel, and we work close with our compatriots in Israel, but official structures, officials, they totally ignore this topic. Our country would like to note, I would like to know that our country identify our memorial dates on our own, and we clearly articulated that as a response to their own article that was sent to a Russian newspaper after the statements of the previous ambassador of Israel to Russia that taught ourselves what to do. Russia in 2025 was among the initiators and co-authors of the resolutions 60-70 dedicated to the victims of the Holocaust. Don't forget about that, and don't forget the wordings of the resolutions, not only of these resolutions and many other documents of the international organization. That's how they formulate what the Holocaust is. And I want to believe that our Israeli partners remember about that. It was the day of the liberation of the survived prisoners of the Auschwitz and Birkenau by the Red Army, by the very same Red Army, the monuments to whom are taken down in Europe. And after they're taken down, we did not hear any statement from Yad Vashem or Israel missions, permanent missions, foreign ministry, or other public state-affiliated organizations.
Compatriots yes. They are defending, but official sources are keeping silence, and they should not lecture us on what to celebrate. We believe that we need to preserve the historic memory. Without any doubts, this is for common interest of the people of Russia and Israel, and we will continue to closely cooperate with the Israeli on this significant for the bilateral agenda and our prevention of falsification of history. Let me reiterate that today, just a couple seconds ago, I voiced the topic of connected with the demolition of another monument. Let me recall you that the Czech Republic, Teplice, on the 15th of December, the monument was eliminated, dedicated to the Red Army, and it started on the 7th of May 2025. And now we can hear the position of Yad Vashem on this regard. So let us continue. If Sputnik Moldova with us. We have a question. The other day, to the interview to the British gentleman, the President of Moldova, Maya Sandu, said that she advocates the joining of the Republic to Romania. The ruling party, PASM, shortly after declared that it's ready to start agitation at this relevant referendum. So the Moldovan opposition accused the head of state of the act of political betrayal of the sovereignty of the statehood as it is. And I would like to know, Madam Zakharova, your comments about this awkward situation. We make regular comments, and you call the things they are. And what is Romanian is being pushed to? We've already mentioned that it's not a kind of Euro integration, it's not a kind of movement towards democracy. That has nothing to do with improving the level of life. This is just another absorption of the Romanian forces by all those who ignore the Moldovan sovereignty. We were said that we are telling lies. Right now you are telling yourself. We didn't hear anything new here, and the current head of Moldova, the citizen of Romania, Maya Sandu, she announced loud that it was the main argument of her coming to power, and her policy since 2020. She was guided by this prerogative to strip Romania of its sovereignty and independence, to blur the historic memory among its people, and to make everything she can so that the Moldovans didn't know their history, refuse their identity, and saying that their language is Moldovan language, and making it a kind of a Romanian language, rewriting the heroic pages of history, just erasing all these pages from the historic books, textbooks. That's what she has done, and it proves her words. The forced Romanization, the ouster of everything that points to the Moldovan identity is quite clear. To be broadly speaking, they are trying to reformat country that would fit to the neoliberal standards, and I can repeat once again all these facts in order to prove this thesis. The overwhelming part are Armenians of the ruling structure are Romanians. It's quite obvious that the main objective of the foreign officials who invaded the Moldova, they are trying to strip this country of independence and sovereignty, and we have made a lot of comments on that when we see that the military cooperation of Chisinau with Bucharest is being increased as a NATO member. We don't see any neutrality here. They are moving towards not even Romania, but where they are even absorbed by the neighbor states. Which is a country, which is a NATO member. Moldovan military regularly participate in joint military exercises to align the compatibility of the armies. Compatibility against whom? They consistently erase the constitutionally recorded status of sovereignty and neutrality, which for many years ensured independence of the country. In March 2023, the party actions of solidarity, including the Constitution of Moldova, the words Moldovan language, and you remember that, was replaced with the term into Romanian language. The school program, instead of history of Moldavia, the history of Romania was introduced. And now the children are being taught following this textbook, falsified textbook. Regularly, in various parts of the Republic, funerals of Romanian heroes are being opened up. Are there any heroes in Romania? Yes, there are, but not that imposed to Moldova. And all those who were, and right now, they are being declared, all those victims are declared heroes in Moldova. Aggressive expansion of the Bessarabia metropolis of the Romanian Orthodox Church in violation of the borders of the canonic borders. The Russian media, including TV channels, are being blocked, replaced with Romanian TV channels. And I think that it's enough in order to update this topic with due account and referring to the facts. For Chisinau and the sovereignty of republic and national identity, cultural code of the Moldovans, they completely ignore this, except for one thing. This is an impediment. They view it as an impediment and obstacle. They prioritize the idea and target to serve the interests of the Western curators under pretext of implementing the so-called Euro integration project. The opinion of the Moldovan people is ignored. Moldova sees it and doesn't like this thing. Many flee abroad, and I cited the numbers today. It's sad to see how Russophobia is gaining momentum and eroding the Moldovan society, not because it is as it is, but because this poisonous acid is being poured on them by Sandu's regime, and back then it was a prosperous republic. Let's move on further. Do you have any other questions? Russia Today, please. Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. Red Balkan. We have 2 questions to you today. Can you share the latest on the sale of the Russian share of to the oil industry of Serbia, and why Russia decided to sell its share to the company? Was it the decision a kind of satisfaction of Serbia's claims, which wanted to have functional oil company, including oil processing plant, although the Russian owner had a chance to stay in the country and because of the American sanctions and preserve its property before the situation with sanctions is resolved? But let me mention that in our country, all these talks concerning the oil company in Serbia are being headed by the Ministry of Energy. So if you let me, I will address this question to the Ministry of Energy, and we can ask for a comment for you of this ministry, because this is their scope of competence. And we will do whatever we can in order to provide you an answer. And thank you. And the second question, how can you comment the statement of the Defense Minister of France shortly before his visit to Zagreb that the combat aircraft Rafale was sold to Serbia and to Croatia due to strategic interest of the EU and NATO to progressively liberate Serbia from dependence from Russia and strengthen its ties with the Western countries? What dependence is truly detrimental to Serbia, and why strategic interest of the EU and NATO, and they prioritize the deterioration of relations between Serbia and Russia? There's nothing awkward to me, and throughout many years Serbia was compelled to disrupt mutually beneficial historic ties with Russia. The Western countries tried to drive a wedge into the Russia-Serbia relations in order to subjugate Belgrade to the interests of EU and NATO. But unfortunately, this all goes for the detriment of Serbia in order to make this country a kind of an obedient structure that follows the instructions of all the others, to strip off its self-identity, to make its voice weaker, to blur the cultural identity of Serbia, to impose some alien will and values. And along with that, the Western elite tries to purge from presence the traditional presence of Russia in the region, so that we cannot be presented there. So if we see the projects, we have a look at the projects, and we've already mentioned in your previous question about our exclusive focus on making this project prosperous one, I mean the oil project. If we have a look at other projects, they are not even pragmatic and beneficial. They're aiming to strengthen Serbia's prosperity, to strengthen cultural and humanitarian aspect of this country. In general, this is a beneficial policy for the benefit of Serbia and its nation. And in terms of the Western ideology, Serbia should be stripped of these benefits. The Western countries just seek their own agenda. It's a detrimental and awkward practice. Undermining of the Russia-Serbia political and trade and economic ties is an overall objective, a strategic objective of NATO and the EU to oust all third, as they claim it, countries from the Balkan region, both Russia, China and Turkey, so that no one was present there. and their purpose is crystal clear, so that Serbia be dissolved, be dependent, so that Serbia be dependent on Brussels. Thomas Mann has his novel, Loyal Subjects. It's like loyalty, a kind of loyalty. No other independence or equal role is not seen by Brussels to Serbia. They just want to absorb and subjugate and to impose its will on other states. And I refer to Serbia right now. If there is no communication, normal communication, in terms of financial, humanitarian ties with Russia, leads to the collapse of their countries. They cannot do anything because they are tied with some obligations under the pretext of some collective auspices. In fact, they are being guided by bureaucracy imposed by the figures such as Ursula von der Leyen, Josep Borrell, and others. So the Europeans believe that this should have stripped Serbia of political sovereignty. And I believe that Serbia, being a freedom-loving, independent nation which sacrificed many lives and hardships, will stand strong, not because it's beneficial to Russia, China, or anyone else. It's because Serbs believe that they should take their own path of development. Thank you very much. Is Izvestia with us? Yes, good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. Meets Izvestia. We have two questions concerning that Ursula von der Leyen called Russia to show interest in regulating the conflict in Ukraine. What is the assessment of the Foreign Minister of Russia of the statement of the head of the European Commission on the need to show that it's willing to show its willingness for peace with due account of Russian position, which it showed on many occasions on this settlement? Our position, I mean the position of our country on the Ukrainian settlement, has been mentioned on numerous occasions at the top level and does not need any additional signals. Moscow has always been steadfast and open for the equal dialogue. And I believe that equality and equal dialogue is the basis of all this. Russia has always shown interest for mutually beneficial solutions, and as for the European Union, we see that they do not want to do so. I've just cited today that while speaking about peace, they were preparing for war, not to preserve peace, but to warm up and fire up tensions. And this proves that they are lying and that their ideology is flawed, because I don't see any sense in cooperating with them if they use ultimatums, claim unilateral concessions, trying to take over Russia. I believe that if we talk about the strategy, I think there is nothing wrong, but being cunning is good. But on the other hand, the lies they use, this is the manipulation based on the crimes, extremism, terrorism, and so on. And these are quite different things. There's no interest of Europe in settlement of the conflict because Europeans have not shown any desire to engage in a direct and honest dialogue with Russia. The day before yesterday, yes, there was a press conference between the foreign minister with his counterpart, from Namibia yesterday. They discussed some awkward recalls of President of France, of Emmanuel Macron, saying that he wanted to make contacts with Moscow, although he scrutinized Moscow previously, but in December he said that he was willing to establish new contacts or to resume contacts, but it all ended up to some assertive rhetoric and so on and so forth. The European Union has already forgotten the European diplomacy. They do not want to discuss the settlement of the Ukrainian crisis, but they are committed to torpedo any Russia and American initiatives in search for peaceful solutions. They are wiping up Russophobia and anti-Russia narrative. And it is proved by the digits and by the figures themselves, and I'm referring to their aid, to the funds sent to Kyiv. This is a kind of not even a military aid, but a financial aid and terrorist aid. The European Commission reported that it supported Ukraine since the start of the special military operation, and by beginning of January 2026 reached 193.3 billion euros, so over 193 billions of euros, unspeakable numbers, and 69.3 billion euros were allocated for the Ukrainian army. And as for the rest money, we've got to know from recent documents showing complete corrupt nature of the Kyiv regime. Today, I've already mentioned that for this money, using this money as well, they send children to Turkey, as they call it, rehabilitation, and children there in Turkey come back being pregnant.
Within this mission, more than 85,000 Ukrainian fighters were trained on the territory of the member states of the association. They are making cannon fodder out of them, and the British and the French continue to lobby the aggressive plans for the security guarantees. They should understand that this idea is unacceptable for Russia, but they stubbornly do that in attempt to attempt any constructive, peaceful settlement. Is this an effort to done to ignore that? I answered this question already. Is Sinhua with us? Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. Sinhua is here. With the introduction of visa-free regime, the tourist flow between Russia and China is growing, but some Chinese tourists care about the mobile service, accessibility of payment, and the registration during their trips to Russia. What measures does Russia make to make the presence of the foreign tourists more comfortable? And what tracks does Russia and China can strengthen cooperation? As you noted, the tourist flow between Russia and China is gradually growing. With the introduction of a visa-free regime, the number of mutual trips has significantly increased, and in 2025 exceeded 2.4 million. We are happy to receive guests from China and other countries in the world. We create all the necessary conditions for their comfortable presence. We are developing new tourist routes we create a modern infrastructure. There are no reasons to be concerned about the things that you mentioned. On the websites of our foreign missions in China, one can find all the necessary information to be prepared for the trip. In any case, for those who come to another country, there are things that are different from those they're accustomed to. And I'd like to say that when I come to China, certain inconveniences happen to do with payments, for example, because cards unfortunately do not work because Russia was de-SWIFTed. Unfortunately, we have to find alternative options. This inconvenience is manifested in various situations in various countries. We have to find ways out. Our countries should work to minimize inconveniences for tourists. And despite the fact that for many years people have been using cards, now I come to China. Unfortunately, I mostly go there on business trips, not for tourist purposes. If there is a need to pay for something, if I have to go somewhere outside the hotel, I have to do like our parents did. I have to change money in the exchange offices. And of course, this does not reflect the modern technological achievements. This is an opportunity to see what we can do for the tourists from our country so their presence is more comfortable. But let us finish on the positive note. Both in Russia and China, there are a lot of wonderful places, and I'm sure that learning more about traditions and culture of each other will facilitate strengthening humanitarian foundation of our relations, our friendship. I'm always happy to meet our Chinese friends. Welcome to Russia. We have a wonderful tradition. It appeared a couple of years ago, but it has come to be an important part of this important part of our year. I mean, the celebrations of the Chinese New Year. It gives an opportunity with love and hospitality to show these traditions in Moscow. Moscow is an open platform for interesting cultural experimentations, and this experiment was very successful in my opinion. Traditionally, Chinese New Year takes place in Moscow, and it's a huge event. We will be happy to see Chinese tourists in Russia as well, and Russian tourists in Moscow at the events to do with the Chinese culture. Equally as wonderful, the Russian Muslims holiday takes place in China. And I think you know that already. I think it is also a wonderful tradition here. I just named a few, but from many, many more of them. Thank you very much. Thanks to you. You know, we have exchanged cultural years that were declared. They are over. They were 2024 and 2025. But they set a wonderful example for mutual humanitarian and cultural enrichment and implementation of a lot of projects. So I think it will be followed up on. There were events within the framework. They were in the interstate calendar, within the agreement. But also there were events, the public events, as a response to this. They became a part of this huge agenda. And I think that people understood, both here in Russia and in China, that it is interesting, it is beneficial. It is aimed at mutual enrichment in terms of culture and knowledge. And I think that this tradition will live on to hold major, or probably not that major, events in our countries. Thank you very much. Thanks to you. Is China Media Group with us? We have one question. You already commented on the situation with the Greenland and the US in the first part of the briefing. Nevertheless, Donald Trump recently said that the US is going to introduce 25% tariffs on any countries that trade with Iran. What does Russia think about this, the use of unilateral sanctions against sovereign countries? Are we going to change our cooperation with Russia's cooperation with Iran in key spheres, for example, in energy? This question was commented on in detail by our Minister Sergei Lavrov. He said, and I'm not going to cite, I think that you got to know that, and I will provide a link to this quote in the text of the briefing. Russia does not recognize, does not accept that, and we will continue with this approach. Our cooperation with Iran is beneficial. We are committed to cooperation in various spheres, including in energy. We will continue developing cooperation with all interested states based on our national interest. We won't be guided by the threats and blackmail of third countries. Thank you. Is Rita with us? Do you have any more questions, Rita? Yes, indeed. Good afternoon. Rita is here. We have questions still, though you partly commented on them. Question 1. It's about Greenland. Donald Trump is quite stubborn in saying that if the US won't take control of Greenland, it will be seized by Russia or China. It is not about the activities of Russia or China, but about the intention. What can you say about these words? First of all, I already commented on them. Second, why don't you want to ask the US president? Why don't you ask this question to all the European Union and the Western Europe? Only because Russia and China are mentioned here. I believe the main participants of this drama should be covered in the first place. Ask them what's going on with international law, rules-based world order. This is hilarious. I mean, indeed. We already talked about it today. I am absolutely sure that when they divided Serbia and Kosovo almost 20 years ago, a little less than 20 years ago, all the Westerners after they did not go to the UN Security Council, though they started a parade of recognizing Kosovo as a sovereign state, the whole EU proudly added one more star to their flag. But I think they did not think that they will forestall that. But why does this situation any different? Probably they thought that they will be saved by because of the loyalty of the US. Look what the Russian president said back then. That's when Vladimir Putin addressed the Munich conference, security conference, and the government actively commented on the situation around Kosovo with illegitimate annexation of it from Serbia. This was a precedent, and this can come to anyone, but the EU thought otherwise. They are untouched. They said that they thought that Russia was threatening them. They couldn't even imagine that they would be taken hostage of this scheme that were endorsed and designed by them. But let them enjoy it. Eat what you prepared. Don't choke. Thank you for this commentary. I have another question. It is quite multidimensional, but I would say that the previous one was not very specific. The president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, who was kidnapped by the US during the holidays, became the second president after Bashar Assad, the head of state that is friendly to Russia, that was toppled with force. Does Moscow see this as an assault on its positions at the international arena? Is it afraid of the mass protest in Iran? But please, let's pause here. Let's deal with this first. Venezuela, Iran, Russia, the US, and so on. Let's start with this part. If we are concerned, if we should be concerned about anything, but you said that it is a generic question. Well, if we are to be concerned, we shouldn't be concerned individually, but collectively. But we should be concerned by the destruction of international law. Some national vested interest shouldn't play a role here. Steps are taken every day that change our personal plans, our public plans. Every second something is going on. But such actions destroy the international legal system. What does this mean? Let's say as it is. Just like with Kosovo, that was seized, that was taken away from Serbia illegally. The strategy is now applied to Greenland and Denmark. Inside this coalition, I'm not talking about the global majority here, within the collective minority, with the Western minority, they don't have a pillar, the basis, so that these processes are stopped in the legal framework or to be settled legally. All those who said that the situation in Kosovo was unacceptable, these countries have something to rely on, and now we're talking not about the violation of somebody's agreements, union commitments, and so on. We are talking about the global undermining of the legal system. When there was an outrage about the situation in Crimea and Donbass, that ostensibly Russia acts illegitimately, we refer to international law that said about the will of nations, the right for self-determinations, and thus these references are not only theoretical, they are practically applied. This happens within the international law, probably as any other law. The provisions of the international law provide for various interpretations. There's no doubt about it, but this is a basis. Now the territories are divided, and countries are divided without any reference to any international legal provisions and norms. That's what I'm talking about. That's what is going on with the interference into internal affairs and coup d'etats. No references to international law, the UN Charter, the conventions and treaties signed by anyone. They're not cited, they're not referred to. Listen to Kaya Kallas, as you mentioned Iran. She said that they need, and Ursula von der Leyen said the same thing, that they need to increase the level of sanctions pressure to make people in Iran even more turbulent, which will lead to coup d'etat. And they said that directly. The interests of all those who believe that international law should be respected, the rights of these people are violated. But the international law was a sphere that gave a chance to the world, to countries, to negotiate, to agree with each other on legal grounds, to bet not only on force, on the possibility to trick someone with force and some other things, and to rule the world. Without law, there is no democracy. Today, this is a threat to everyone who believes that democracy is the best system, because democracy can be applied not only within states. Democracy, as it is declared, including in the West, the perfect system. It should be demonstrated in the international.
So how can we talk about democracy in international relations where there's no legal system? Democracy is based only on laws. Because in order to define quorum, majority, or consensus, you need to have a law, not just an ability to count. Yes. If you don't mind, the second part of my second question. If the tensions are escalated in Iran, what help can Russia provide to Tehran? I believe that I answered to this question in my comment to your Chinese colleagues. Thank you very much, Madam Zakharova. So let's move on. Is France Press with us? Madam Zakharova, good afternoon. We have a similar question. So the most important that it would be similar because it coincides somehow with the previous question and not because you got some questions from somewhere. No, I think that's not possible. We have another question, maybe a surprise question. We had it today. In Niger, there is an outcry about the nuclear fuel that was allegedly, with uranium to be exact, ended up in the territory of airport in Niamey, in the capital. And Russia, in general, spoke out loud that it was interested in joint exploration of uranium in Niamey. Is Russia ready to get this nuclear fuel? Do you account that this topic emerged just during the briefing, and I need to have a look at what is playing out right now, and if it's so relevant, I can give an answer and then publish it, and we can answer you personally. Thank you. Is Anadolu with us? Yes, good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. Good afternoon. You've answered 2 questions, but we have a third one. We've just seen film Nuremberg. Can you share your assessments on the image of Russia? It's an American film. No, I haven't seen this movie. No, I haven't seen this movie because there are a lot of such movies, but I haven't seen this exact movie. When it was released, I think it was in December. No, I have not seen it. I will try to do so and come back with my comments. Thank you very much. Is Almaydin with us? Yes, good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. I think you have answered to our questions, and thank you very much. Is Rudaf with us?
Thanks a lot for your time. And I have 3 questions, but you have already answered one of them. And I will start with my second question. Over the past year, the Damascus forces or their affiliated groups have reportedly attacked Druze, Alawites, and Kurdish neighborhoods in Aleppo. There are reports that these attacks might continue in other areas. What's Russia's position on these attacks, particularly the most recent one targeting Kurdish neighborhoods in Aleppo?
I would like to say that, of course, we were concerned about the developments playing out in Aleppo and this escalation, and we prioritize ensuring security of civilians and their protection. Of course, attacks on them is not tolerated by Russia. We are persuaded that the path towards a long-term, sustainable and robust normalization in Syria lies through negotiation with the participation of all ethnic communities of the Syrian society. And we believe that it is of principal importance to respect the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Syria, and the recent events confirm that the relevance of the tasks of the agreements on reintegration of the Euphrates region signed in March 2025 between Syria and the Syrian Democratic Forces leadership.
Is that in your discussions with Iraqi and Turkish officials, have you addressed security cooperation? Is Russia seeking to develop security cooperation with them, particularly through the sale of Russian weapons and new technologies?
We are in a close contact both with Turkey and Iraq on a wide range of issues of mutual interest, including regional and country security. So let me end up with this, if you don't mind. Thank you very much. We are moving on. Is Pakistan media, Doni News Pakistan, with us?
Pakistan, thank you for taking my question. I have one question today. Iran says that the recent unrest inside the country is supported by the United States and Israel. There are also reports that the United States may be preparing some kind of action against Iran. Does Russia think that the United States may try something similar to what it did in Venezuela. How does Moscow view the current situation around Iran?
Ну, я начну со второго вашего вопроса.
Let me start by the second part of your question, and I've answered it today on many occasions. And we have statements published at the website of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and our Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov expanded on this topic just a day ago. As for the first part of your question about the attempts of the US against Iran, here I don't have any comments, because these questions should be addressed to the Americans. And we believe, and let me reiterate, that the toppling down of regimes cannot be tolerated by the modern community. Moreover, taking into account, if we are speaking about the respect for the UN Charter, here it's about the sovereign state of Iran with powerful democratic values and traditions, respecting democracy and history, their own history. But we see the Western countries, you've named the United States, you've named Israel, but you didn't name the EU, resorts to all possible tools in order to settle the situation and to affect and influence Iran, its leadership and its nation, to topple the current government, and are very open in their aspirations. I don't know if there are other plans. You need to address these questions to them. I think it's crystal clear that they weaponize economy, social and economic situation in order to pursue illegitimate coup d'etat. And that's what they are doing. I believe that no country in the United Nations has a right to resort to these tools and techniques if they respect the UN Charter. Thank you very much. Let's move on. Is Newsroom with us? Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. It came out that many questions are interconnected today. The US President Donald Trump, I don't insist on your question, but it's important to us. Thank you. The President of US, Donald Trump, under pretext of ensuring security from Russia and China, said that he wants to establish control in Greenland, viewing it as a strategic interest of US. What is the prospects and perspective of Russia of this? Can it be lead to the dissent in NATO? So let us reflect on that a little bit. Neither Russia nor China claimed anything like that. There are no facts that can prove these accusations, and that's my first point. By the way, Russia and China recently have been claiming that they want to develop this region and relations with this region. For our part, it's a natural interaction. We are a part of the polar region. China has technological capabilities along with financial and humanitarian technologies. They have good production capabilities. China has ambitions to come into this region in terms of economic, financial, technological power. So I have a question. Speaking about and saying that the United States want to preserve this region, the Greenland, or any other neighboring region, and to defend it from any other claims, aggressive claims of Russia or China. I can say that we have no such intentions. It means that this region, they want to put it beyond, withdraw it from cooperation with Russia. And why? Because it's not a competitive player, I believe. I believe that our ways of cooperating with third countries and other ways to have business, I think it will be more interesting and attractive to these regions because we provide guarantees building on the international law. We respect international law and international treaties. We do not withdraw from treaties by signing just shortly before that with another country some agreement. We are not fooling anyone, withdrawing without any warning. We are responsible. Russia is a responsible country, international player, which means competitiveness, fair competitiveness in resolving differences based on peaceful solutions, on the equal dialogue, expecting the same attitude from our partners. That's why I believe this is all playing out. Because this pattern of behavior and pattern of cooperation on international arena suggested by Russia and China is indeed a powerful and robust basis for the development, the internal development, international contacts, and all they want is to discredit our country, using all these illegitimate toolbox available to them to oust us from this media and public space, and that's what we call neocolonialism. And that's the way it is. But the problem is that the West Europe, EU, believed that if they were members of NATO, if they have connections with the United States because of their membership, their belief, blind belief, and they went wrong. Thank you very much. Thank you. Is Balt News with us? Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. The intelligence services of Russia said that the Constantinople Patriarch of Bartholomew is obsessed with the idea to oust the Russian Orthodoxy from the Baltic states, trying to distance the Lithuanian, Latvian, and Estonian Orthodox Church from the Moscow Patriarchate, trying to attract its priests. What are the aims of the Constantinople Patriarchate, and is it independent in its aspirations? Does the Ministry of the has any ties with the Moscow Patriarchate, and does it has anything to do with the church diplomacy? Let me expand on the last part of your question. Of course, the comment that was made by the intelligence service of Russia is a comprehensive comment. So we do not need to make our own comment, but nevertheless, let me speak up. I think that the Constantinople Patriarchate has been long before in the zone of interest of the Western states, and being very active in the countries which are trying to restrict in the rights of the Orthodox believers who do not want to tolerate with the imposed neoliberal values, who are against some non-canonic ideas. A lot of studies have been published on this topic. We believe that Constantinople acts in frame of political technologies supporting the so-called church opposition, dealing with some political dirty job, not rather than traditional beliefs such as rituals, traditions, philosophy, science. I think they all put it into oblivion. These are political machinations or technologies. Let me recall you that it's not a kind of a church opposition who does not support the official church. I think all these are breakaways. Patriarch Vartholomew establishes problems in the spiritual area in the areas where he could have avoided them. Of course, you should address your question more to the Moscow Patriarchate if you want to know the situation more. As for the protection of the rights of the Russian Orthodox Church and the believers abroad, so these questions is under permanent focus of our foreign ministry. Respect of the rights of the believers, this is a sensitive topic, an important one. Unfortunately, it's being at the tone of geopolitical interests, and even under the wheels of geopolitical interest. It demands not slogans, but a painstaking expert work. It requires a kind of political maturity and love to all those they are concerned about. It's clear that maybe you cannot see some small things behind the big things, but I think that Vartholomew should have seen great sufferings of people in Ukraine and ask a question even to himself. Where these geopolitical experiments led to, experiments to divide orthodoxy in Ukraine, because right now many families and people are surviving and preserving, trying to preserve their soul, fighting for it. With the Ukrainian army, dehumanized Ukrainian army, and this criminal government flooded with money. The situation with the rights of believers in the Baltic states is not better, even flagrant. We see that the Orthodox priests are being scrutinized in order to force them to change their church jurisdiction. We told them once that you need to think about such persecutions on the Russian-speaking population. They answered that it was a kind... No, that's true. They started to persecute all that is connected with the Russian Orthodox Church, Russian culture and language. The most high-profile actions are the actions of the Estonian parliament, who tried to legitimize interference of the state in the Estonian Orthodox Church. We have already given our assessment, and I'm talking about our foreign minister and the Minister on International Cooperation on that to ensure the rights for the freedom of religion by Mr. Melich on June 20th, 2025. As for the cooperation, we have something to say. We have a close cooperation with the Moscow Patriarchate on a wide range of issues of mutual interest, dialogue of culture, religions, protection of the rights of believers, help of those living abroad. And for these purposes, as you know, and I hope you know, back in 2003, a working group on interaction of the Foreign Ministry of Russia and the Russian Orthodox Church was established. The Russian Orthodox Church, as the major and respected public institute in our country, has the same mechanisms, consultative mechanisms, with many other bodies at the federal and regional level. We have an intense dialogue between other conventions, and you know, by the way, I would like to say, just not to give pretext to anyone, that we do not have such things. We have an active dialogue between other conventions, and it confirms that the high level of state confessional interaction in our country, and by the way, this dialogue, this is a work, and it's highly appreciated by the believers and parishioners, by all those who belong to this or that convention. They are grateful for this dialogue between the foreign ministry and various confessions, because it has practical outcome and aims to defend the rights of values that are very important to them. By the way, I would like to underline that the Minister of Foreign Affairs acts in strict compliance with the enshrined in the Constitution of our state the principle of the so-called secularism. But right now, I'm speaking in good terms, with good connotation, when we are talking about inter-church diplomacy. Of course, we are not engaged in this. We help to answer the requests. We help where this help is needed, but not otherwise. We are not acting as mediators. Or some authorized borders. We respond to the requests and the tasks set before us by the relevant confessions that reflect the aspirations of its parishioners. Thank you very much.
С нами ли телеканал?
Is the Kurdistan 24 with us? Yes. Madam Zakharova, good afternoon. I represent the Kurdistan 24 TV channel. I have one question. After the attack against Kurds by the government forces of Damascus, civilians died, including women and children. Now the armed Arab formations shell civilians and torture them. What can you say about this aggression against the civilians of Aleppo from the formations of Damascus? What can be done to protect people? I understand your question. I partly answered your question earlier. I touched upon this question. We follow closely the situation in Syria. On January 6th, the situation exacerbated in Aleppo significantly. In the northern neighborhoods, there were fights. On January the 10th, the authorities of Syria declared that they took control of the above-mentioned districts. We were concerned about the developments in Aleppo. According to the reports, civilians are among those killed and wounded. Tens of thousands of people had to leave their homes. Civil infrastructure was severely damaged. We prioritize the security of civilians. Such attacks are unacceptable. We believe that the path to long-lasting, sustainable stabilization in Syria lies through wide dialogue. It should be aimed at strengthening national concordance while accounting for interests of all representatives of all ethnic and confessional groups of the Syrian society. We believe that it is of principal importance to respect sovereignty and territorial integrity of Syria. The recent development, I'll tell you again and again, confirmed the relevance of the goal to implement the agreements to reintegrate the Euphrates region in the legal framework, in the legal space of the Syrian state. They were reached in March 2025. Thank you. Thanks to you. Is Lentadot, are you with us? Yes, good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. We have one question. You talked quite about it in quite detail, but I would like to specify one thing. Donald Trump recently said the defense of Greenland consists of two dog sets, while Russian and Chinese submarines and ships are very close. The head of Donald Trump said that the U.S. will seize the island one way or another. How this will influence the relation between Moscow and Washington. I talked about it already while answering other questions. In the very material, in the first part of our briefing, I talked about it, and there was a question, not rhetorical, about what to do with the international legal framework. And but this is not an issue of bilateral relations between Russia or between the U.S. and Denmark and I don't know, or their self-governing territory, Greenland, or between Russia and the U.S., between China and Denmark, or China and the U.S. I'm talking about the whole system of international relations. This is called the new normality in international relations. This is the new ethics. Or is it not? Or the international law is the ethics. When we talk that without international law, without laws that are respected by countries, not one-day lottery tickets, but laws, everything will turn into chaos. We were told, let's not do that. We have a rules-based world order. The West said, we'll deal with that. But they did not deal with it. What does Russia and China have to do with that? I don't know. We have nothing to do with that. Earlier, the US and the current administration did not even mention us, but they just need some beginning to explain. We see chaotic measures from the EU, a lot of regiments for ostensibly protecting Greenland. Everything is clear. For a long time, the Western world has been in crisis, and this Western world says it for itself. Because they get metals, natural resources, gems, etc., at their will. They do what they wish. But at the same time, the technological development, the aims that they set for themselves as their growth rates, financial indicators require more and more resources. But where can they get them? This is the question. They want to take them away from someone and to look for countries that are probably destabilized, but Russia and China have nothing to do with that. We want to negotiate and to respect interest, not only our interest, but also the interests of those that we have a dialogue with. We show that the resource-based economics, finances can be done with respect, that we can afford not to take away oil and gas from someone, not to expand, but do that on mutually beneficial basis. China shows pretty much the same thing, that despite the differences in political systems, of traditions, it turns out that it is possible, equal competition is possible. This is not a model that the West has been pursuing for centuries, to take something away and to leave the country with nothing, and to say that they are unique. Somewhere here lies an answer to your question. Thank you very much. I'm waiting for this. They've always saying the European countries used some covert statements or even some steps oppose the security, and they are told that a part of your country will be taken away. So I'm waiting where they are going to expel anyone or to invite ambassadors for conversations. This is the level of affairs. This is how they deal with things. Thank you. Thanks to you. Well, is the embassy live with us? Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. Good afternoon, colleagues. I have two questions. How does Moscow evaluate the possible court decisions regarding Nicolas Maduro? What steps can it take if he's sentenced to death? Now, according to the universal acknowledged norm of international law based on the principle of sovereign equality of states, Nicolas Maduro, as the head of state, has an absolute immunity from the jurisdiction of the US and any other countries beside Venezuela. Leaving alone the issue of illegitimate use of force, we commented already on that. The fact of his abduction and detention violates the international legal commitments of the U.S. Any court decisions will be equally as illegal if the U.S. court remembers the international law and rules to release him. You know, even Western media say that he was kidnapped and seized. The rant that ostensibly Nicolas Maduro is not present anymore and lost his immunity are not true, because that happened as a result of an operation of the U.S. Certain international legal norms exist. None of them were applied. That is why these actions are illegal. So I suggest we talk about this in the legal framework, not in the framework of predictions or anything else. Another question. Can we see the statements of the TV host Vladimir Solovyov about the second-rate importance of Venezuelan and Syrian tracks in comparison with Armenia and the Middle Asia as the official position of Moscow? Oh, let's see. We're talking about the personal opinion of a journalist. This opinion was expressed at a private channel, Solovyov Live. Thought. I read the quote, not based on some parts of his quotes and words, but this was a question. It was not a statement. It was a question, a rhetoric probably, but it's not up to me to decide. Besides, these phrases were clearly presented provocatively as an official position of Russia, but it is unacceptable. These kind of manipulations are unacceptable, and the commentators seized this opportunity to spread a number of quotes, neither in this or other programs, speculations about Russia ostensibly having aggressive aspirations regarding the neighboring post-Soviet states. In this regard, I'd like to, one more time, to say the official position is expressed by the authorized officials. As to the official position of Russia, it was expressed by the leadership of Russia many times about our policy in the context of our common Soviet past, post-Soviet space, their relations with now sovereign states. I'll tell you yet again, this position has been expressed for tens of thousands of times during summits, negotiations, consultations, press conferences, interviews. They were expressed by the President of Russia, the head of the government of the Russian Federation, the foreign minister, a defense minister, of all kinds of ministers. Not to enumerate everyone, but I'll tell you that we regularly maintain dialogue through the existing the post-Soviet space structures like CIS, CSTO. I'd like to mention that through the CSTO there's a format of meetings of these secretaries of security councils. And these very structures and people who had them and numerous experts who work there, they discuss security on this our common region. I don't have an opportunity to provide all the links to you, to these position statements, to the signals. I'll tell you briefly what was said many times. We have historical relations of good neighboring, strategic partnership, friendship, brotherly friendship and cooperation. The key to development of our ties are good personal contacts between the heads of our states based on mutual respect and trust. And I would like to add from myself, we should judge by deeds. We came to help many times. We extended a helping hand of friendship many times. We expressed the best emotions, the compassion. We sincerely shared happiness and joy when we shared the achievements our colleagues and friends in the post-Soviet space. We found ways out from seemingly dead ends. We overcame misunderstandings and other things. We responded to provocations. That what shows the reality. And we shouldn't focus on provocations. Unfortunately, there will be numerous. Let's see the real, not by the fakes and false things. Thank you, Madam Zakharova. Thanks to you. And author E, please. Are you here? Yes, we are here. Congratulations on the belated holidays. You know, I thought recently, probably it has something to do with, I don't know what it has to be, what it has to do with, but let us congratulate with And I also would like to congratulate you on the upcoming holidays. There will be a lot of them. We have accumulated a lot of questions. How does Russia see the new security architecture in Euro-Atlantics and Indo-Pacific region, given the growing crisis around Taiwan and in the relations between the US and China? We talked many times that the hybrid war between the West against our country was and planned and provoked a Ukrainian crisis. A part of this hybrid war drew a line to attempts to implement security model based on Euro-Atlantic mechanisms and led to the collapse of this model. But probably it was not a reality. It was just a decoration. As a strategic reference point, we believe that this is the initiative of the President of Russia of June 14th, 2024. He put it forward here in this very hall. Our view to Eurasia as one common space is explained by mutual influence of military and political processes. It is not a part of the current situation, of the immediate response to the situation. We aspire to create favorable conditions for social and economic development of all Eurasian states. The united architecture would include, in our opinion, understanding and agreements to ensure security between the neighbors based on the principle of equality and indivisibility. The Eurasian countries should take responsibility for settling their own security issues, and the interference is not acceptable. You mentioned Indo-Pacific region. We do not use this term. In the context of the implementation of our initiative, we're talking about the geographic Eurasia. Is the continental Europe, Middle East, South, Central, Northeastern and Southeastern Eurasia. This architecture will be open to all European countries who would like to participate in its creation. An important role will belong to multilateral but not Euro-Atlantic associations. We're prepared to have a dialogue with those Europeans who will abandon the aggressive anti-Russian policy and destabilization of Eurasia.
Thank you. And my second question, what forms of international cooperation on cybersecurity and regulation of Internet of Russia advances at the United Nations and other multilateral platforms? We are persuaded that effective international cooperation on ensuring international information security requires participation of all states without exception. So Russia, along with partners from the developing states, established, let me explain why, because many ask why all states should be included. But we see now that the information security can be undermined apart from example, military and political aspect we were talking about earlier. As for the anti-missile system or some other types of weapons, we can see a kind of a model that threatens information security of the states, of the neighboring states, or the whole world, literally in one specific location, in a state which has no achievements in terms of information and technologies. We see that people right in the mountains or in the field or in the forests deploy tent or other shelters using hundreds, thousands of mobile phones, assembling a kind of a system to hack something. For example, websites, accounts, web portals, servers, accounts, and so on. Moreover, we've learned just recently, and I believe that at one briefing I will focus on it specifically, and it was awkward to me what we've seen. For example, earlier there were kidnappings of people, human trafficking for physical exploitation. People were forced to work, for example, as slaves in some fields, or people were used for sexual exploitation. Right now we're seeing a new type of crimes when people are kidnapped for the work in these cyber information illegal areas, for example, as operators of call centers installed on the territories, on the borders between the states, for example, if the states are in a state of a conflict or unsettled conflict. The zones that cannot be controlled, and such terrific and horrifying farms or call centers are being installed there. Farms that used such kidnapped labor force. I've never knew that people can be forced to do so as well, but it came out that there are such technologies forcing people to work even at this in terms of communication. So that's why I'm speaking about inclusion of all the states to ensure international information security. So Russia, along with partners from the developing states, established in 2026 the World Mechanism on Achievements in Information and Communication Technologies in the context of international security and advancement of responsible behavior in the use of it. On December 1st, 2025, this decision was adopted by the General Assembly resolution, and it's about the establishment to replace the temporary formats, a permanent negotiation board in all aspects of international information security. Along with the agreed procedure of work of its operation, all UN members will participate and all decisions shall be taken by consensus, not so saying that it will be all the decisions will be taken unanimously. Among priorities works is discussing the prospects of universal treaties in order to prevent conflicts and to advance peaceful settlement in information space, as well as support to the developing states. So two components I see here. It's the adoption of universal treaties to prevent such negative scenario and peaceful resolution of conflicts in the information space. Since May 2024, under the auspices of the United Nations, another important mechanism of cooperation in international information security is functioning. Russia initiated Global Intergovernment Director of Contact Points on computer incidents for sharing information on computer incidents. It serves as a communicative channel in order to clarify the circumstances of cyber attacks and is called to serve as a professional venue for interaction of all the structures. The key formats to discuss the key regulation issues, the World Summit of the Information Society and the Internet Governance Forums are engaged. One of the main purposes of this platform is to ensure equal participation of all the states in governing the global network. And in this regard, the extension of the mandate of the World Summit of the Information Society is very important for the next decade, along with the achievement on establishing and extending the format of the permanent UN format on the Internet governance. We have established the framework and it's operating. And my second question is connected with Internet. What are assessments of the Minister of Affairs of the Minister of Internal of Foreign Affairs as for use of Internet as a tool to influence elections, and what measures is proposed by Russia in preventing these conflicts? If you don't mind, I would expand on that and in a written form, and then we can publish this answer. I will provide you an answer personally to you in a written form. Thank you very much. Thank you. Because It's a broad question, and I would like to expand on that, and maybe next briefing I will take it and expand on that. Is Ukraine-Ru with us? Yes, good afternoon, Madam Zakharova, Anna Cherkasova, Ukraine-Ru. I congratulate you with all the holidays. If you don't mind, I have 2 questions. Yes, please. Go ahead. Our first question. Jeffrey Sachs said that Europe once again injures itself. It seems that it lost any sense of diplomacy, and the only way out is to spend trillions of euros for arms. But earlier, in responding to my questions, you mentioned that Europe cut off all diplomatic connections and ties with Russia. Can we act likewise with the European continent like we did during the Hitlerite coalition? What is your question once again? Can we repeat the scenario of the Second World War? Let us stick in this regard some political literacy. We belong to the European continent as well. So I don't understand the term threats from the European continent. Russia is a European state. We are a part of the European civilization. We have very much in common. We have many religions, peoples, ethnicities, traditions. And we are the country which develops traditions of the European civilization and preserve them as well. For the western part of the civilization which has already lost them, and I'm talking about the culture, right, ethics, philosophy, science, and so on. So I think that your question is about military and political alliances, or, for example, the West. I think that's the way you should put your question. I think it's a question about our defense capabilities. We closely follow practical steps of EU and NATO to force militarization of the European countries, building up the military potential at the Russian borders, deployment of offense systems, large drills, provocative drills, and pumping of the Kiev regime with weapons used as a tool. And we make regular comments on that. And amid this aggressive line of the current European leadership against Russia and intimidation of its own population with war, and we believe that these questions are we take these questions very seriously. We cannot tolerate the actions that jeopardize our security, and we will be compelled to respond to this in our military planning, including the programs to update all types of weapons and military equipment. And my second question, Madam Zakharova, today we talked a lot about violations by the US of international law and laws. And what's the format with which the Minister of Foreign Affairs wants to build contacts with the United States? I think we should invite you to the press conference of Minister of Foreign Affairs Sergei Lavrov, and you can ask the question directly to him. And I think he will give you a detailed answer, because your question is a comprehensive one, and it needs a comprehensive response at the high level, because we have a lot to say. And I think it will be interesting to listen to the answer from the minister. Oh, there are a couple of days we have before the press conference. Thank you very much. As I've said earlier, due to the fact that you have comprehensive questions, I will answer to your questions personally in a written form. And of course, all your questions will be answered. So once again, congratulations, my congratulations with all the holidays. And on Tuesday, on the 20th January at 11 a.m., a big press conference by Sergei Lavrov, interpreted into English, simultaneous interpretation into English, French, and Spanish. It will be broadcasted at TV channels, of course, at Russia 24 as well, Russia Today, and of course our social media accounts, and on the website of our ministry, with interpretation, simultaneous interpretation into other languages. So see you soon.